December 12, 1915, Hoboken, New Jersey. A baby is born so large that the delivery nearly kills both mother and child. The doctor reaches for forceps. The metal tears the infant's left cheek, his neck, his ear. The damage is permanent, scars he will carry on his face for the rest of his life. The doctor looks at the child and assumes the worst. He sets the baby aside on a cold kitchen table and turns his attention to saving the mother. It is the grandmother who notices the child is still breathing. She picks him up. She holds him under the cold water tap until he screams. Frank Sinatra's first act on earth is to survive something that should have killed him. It will not be his last. That screaming baby from a Hoboken tenement will become the most famous entertainer in American history. He will fill arenas and command presidents and build an empire in the Nevada desert. He will love one woman so completely that 60 years later they will bury her ring with him. He will be destroyed twice and come back both times. He will record songs that people play at their weddings and at their funerals and in their kitchens late at night when they need someone to understand what they are carrying. He will do all of it his way, every single day. This is episode 1, Before the Fame and the Power and the Heartbreak. This is where Frank Sinatra begins, on a cold kitchen table in New Jersey, screaming at a world that has already tried once to be rid of him. Hoboken. New Jersey in 1915 was not a place that produced legends. It was a waterfront city of immigrants and working men, Italians and Irish and Germans packed into tenement blocks, working the docks and the factories and the construction sites that kept industrial America running. It was rough and proud, possessed of the particular dignity of people who have nothing except their labor and their name, and their refusal to be made to feel small by the people who have more. The Sinatras were Sicilian. Marty Sinatra, Frank's father, was a small man, a boxer who fought under the name Marty O'Brien because Italian names did not sell tickets in the Irish-dominated fight world. A man of few words and considerable toughness who eventually became a Hoboken firefighter. He was not the dominant force in the household. That role belonged entirely to Dolly. Natalie Garaventa Sinatra, Dolly, was the most important person in Frank Sinatra's life from the moment he was born until the day she died. She was politically connected in the way that immigrant women of her generation learned to be politically connected, through sheer force of personality and a willingness to work harder and fight longer than anyone around her. She delivered babies for the neighborhood, she organized votes, she knew everyone worth knowing in Hudson County and was not shy about using those connections. She was also, by every account, terrifying when crossed. Frank inherited everything from her. The ambition, the ferocity, the absolute refusal to accept limits imposed by other people, the loyalty to friends that was total, and the response to enemies that was nuclear, the need to be the center of whatever room he occupied, the iron certainty that he was right, even when he was catastrophically wrong. He was also from the beginning lonely in a specific way. Dolly was busy, politically, socially, professionally. Marty was quiet and distant. Frank was an only child in a household where both parents had lives larger than their domestic one. He learned early to fill his own time, to be his own company, to find the thing that made him feel less alone. He found music, not through lessons. There were no lessons, not through school. Frank's relationship with formal education was brief and unremarkable and ended long before it should have. He found music the way all great natural musicians find it, by listening until he understood, and then by doing until he was better than everyone around him. He listened to Bing Crosby records until he could reproduce every breath and every pause and every note choice. He listened to the radio constantly, to the big band sounds that were remaking American popular music in the 1930s. He sang at every opportunity, church socials, local dances, amateur nights at the neighborhood theater. He was not nervous on stage. He was never nervous on stage. He stepped in front of an audience the way a fish enters water. with the ease of something returning to the element it was built for. Most boys from Hoboken followed their fathers onto the docks. Frank Sinatra declared war on that future before he was old enough to vote. By his late teens, Frank had made a decision that everyone in his life considered delusional and that he considered the only rational choice available to him. He was going to sing for a living, not as a hobby, not as a weekend supplement to a real job, as his life's work, his only occupation, his complete and total purpose. He said it to his parents with the calm certainty of someone reporting a fact rather than announcing a plan. Marty Sinatra did not believe him. Dolly, who believed in Frank more than anyone, also thought he was being a fool. Singing was not a career. Singing was something you did at weddings and then went back to work Monday morning. She arranged a job for him at a newspaper. Steady work, respectable work. Frank quit after 3 months. She arranged other things. He walked away from all of them. This is the part of Frank Sinatra's story that gets lost in the mythology of the fame that followed. The years between 17 and 22, the years of nothing. Playing roadhouses in New Jersey for almost no money, riding in cars that broke down between gigs, sleeping on other people's floors, performing for audiences that ignored him, for club owners who paid him in handshakes, for a music industry that had no idea he existed. He did not stop. He did not adjust his ambitions. He did not decide that perhaps a reasonable compromise was in order. He continued with the absolute, slightly frightening conviction of someone who knows exactly what they are and cannot be talked into being something else. He was also developing in those years of obscurity the thing that would eventually make everything else possible. Not just the voice, the artistry. The understanding that a song was not simply a collection of notes and words, but a story, and that the storyteller's job was to make every person in the room believe the story was being told directly to them privately because the singer understood exactly what they had been through. Frank Sinatra listened to lyrics the way a writer reads another writer, with full critical attention, looking for the emotional truth underneath the poetry. He thought about phrasing the way an actor thinks about a scene. He understood, before anyone taught him, that the pause before the note is as important as the note itself. That silence is part of music. That what you choose not to sing is as expressive as what you choose to sing. He was teaching himself to be extraordinary in the basements and roadhouses of New Jersey, and nobody outside of Hoboken knew it yet. Then the right people heard him, and everything changed overnight. 1939. Frank Sinatra is performing with a small local group called the Hoboken Four at a roadhouse in New Jersey. Harry James, one of the most celebrated band leaders in America, a trumpet player of genuine brilliance who had just left Benny Goodman's orchestra to form his own band, Riot, is in the audience. James hears Sinatra sing one song. He signs him before the night is over. The contract Sinatra signs with Harry James is worth $65 a week. He considers it a fortune. More importantly, he considers it evidence. The first external confirmation from someone whose opinion mattered that the decision he had made in Hoboken was not a delusion. Someone with real standing in the real music world had heard Frank Sinatra and wanted him. He stays with Harry James for 6 months. Then Tommy Dorsey calls. Tommy Dorsey was the greatest band leader in America at that moment. Technically brilliant, enormously popular, and a demanding employer who ran his orchestra with military precision and expected the same from every musician who worked for him. Joining the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra was the equivalent, in the music world of 1940, of being called up to the greatest team in the league. What Sinatra learned from Dorsey changed everything he would ever do with a microphone. Dorsey played the trombone with a legato style, long connected phrases that seemed to have no breath break in them, the notes flowing into each other like water. The secret was circular breathing, a technique that allowed Dorsey to take in air through his nose while simultaneously expelling air through his mouth, creating the illusion of infinite breath. Sinatra could not play trombone, but he could observe. And what he observed was a physical discipline that could be applied to the human voice. He began training his lungs the way an athlete trains muscle. He swam laps in swimming pools while holding his breath. extending the duration week by week. He ran. He practiced breath control with the systematic intensity of someone preparing for physical competition. The voice was his instrument, and he was going to make it capable of things that had not been done before. The results showed immediately. Sinatra's phrasing with the Dorsey Orchestra was different from anything American audiences had heard from a popular singer. He could hold a note or a phrase across distances that forced listeners to hold their own breath in sympathy. He could tell a lyric's full emotional story in a single unbroken line of sound. The audiences noticed. The fan mail began to arrive, not for the band, but for the skinny kid from Hoboken who stood in front of it. He was inside the most successful band in America. He walked away. Everyone called it the worst decision in music history. He knew something they didn't. By 1942, Frank Sinatra had spent 2 years with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra and had become the most popular element of the most popular band in America. He was 26 years old. He was receiving more fan mail than any other musician in the country. He was, by any conventional measure, exactly where a young singer should want to be. He told Tommy Dorsey he was leaving to go solo. The reaction from the music industry was uniform and emphatic. It was too soon. Nobody left Tommy Dorsey and survived. The band was the draw, the brand, the commercial machine, and individual singers who separated from it found themselves adrift in a market that had no particular reason to follow them. Frank Sinatra was good, certainly, but good and bankable were different things. And walking away from the Dorsey machine to test whether audiences would follow him alone was a gamble that the consensus of the industry considered suicidal. Dorsey himself was furious. The departure was contractually complicated. Sinatra owed Dorsey a percentage of his future earnings under the terms of the original agreement, and extracting himself from that obligation required the kind of negotiation that generated rumors and dark stories that followed Sinatra for years. None of it deterred him. He had watched the audiences at the Dorsey shows long enough to understand something that the industry had not yet processed. They were not there for Tommy Dorsey. They were there for Frank. When he stepped to the microphone, something happened in the room that was qualitatively different from what happened when the band played without him. The girls in the front rows were not reacting to a musician performing a song. They were reacting to something more personal, more direct, more difficult to explain. He was going to test that theory alone, without the band, without the machine, just a microphone and a voice and 30 years of longing from a kid from Hoboken who had decided at 17 that this was the only thing worth doing. December 30th, 1942. The Paramount Theater, New York City. He walked onto that stage alone. What happened next has never been fully explained. The Paramount Theater on Times Square was the premier entertainment venue in America. To headline the Paramount was to announce yourself to the music world in the clearest possible terms. This person matters. This person has arrived. This is someone the country needs to pay attention to. Frank Sinatra was not headlining. He was the opening act for Benny Goodman's orchestra, a booking that reflected his actual commercial standing at that moment. He was promising. He was on his way. He was not yet the reason people bought tickets. The audience that night was young, teenagers, mostly girls, the Bobby Soxers who had been writing him fan letters during the Dorsey years and who had organized in the weeks before the show in ways that nobody fully understood until it was too late to do anything about it. Frank Sinatra walked out onto the Paramount stage. What happened in the next 60 seconds was unlike anything Times Square had ever produced and unlike anything the American entertainment industry had encountered before. The girls in the audience began to scream. Not politely, not enthusiastically, they screamed with the full force of something that had been building for months, an emotional response so extreme and so physical that it alarmed the people witnessing it. Girls in the balcony threw their bobby socks onto the stage. Girls in the orchestra section fainted and had to be carried out. The crowd outside the theater, thousands of people who could not get tickets and had gathered on the sidewalk, heard the screaming inside and surged against the doors. The police were called. 30 police officers. It was not enough. Benny Goodman, one of the greatest band leaders in history, a man who had been mobbed by fans himself, stood in the wings and watched Sinatra's effect on the audience with an expression those present described as genuine bewilderment. He had never seen anything like it. Nobody had. Inside the theater, Frank Sinatra stood at the microphone and sang. He was not performing excitement. He was not amplifying the hysteria. He was singing quietly and directly and with complete concentration to the person in the room who needed most to be sung to. The paradox of Sinatra, a paradox that would define his entire career, was that the more intimate he became, the more enormous the response. The more personal his connection to a single lyric, a single emotional truth, the more thousands of people simultaneously felt he was speaking to them alone. The papers the next morning struggled to describe what had occurred. Columnist Earl Wilson called it the Columbus Day Riot. The New York Times attempted sociological explanations. Nobody quite captured it because what had happened was not a sociological event. It was a singular encounter between a particular human voice and a particular human hunger. The hunger of young women in a country at war to feel that someone understood them. Someone was singing specifically for them. Someone knew exactly what longing felt like. Frank Sinatra knew what longing felt like. He had felt it his entire life. Thousands of men could sing. One man could make you feel you were the only person in the room. That was the difference between talent and Frank Sinatra. What Sinatra did with a song was fundamentally different from what other singers did. And the difference was not primarily technical, though the technical elements were extraordinary, but philosophical. Most popular singers of the era performed songs. They stood at the microphone and delivered the notes and the lyrics with skill and feeling and professionalism. The audience received the performance. The transaction was clear and bounded. Sinatra eliminated the transaction. He made the song a conversation, private, direct, between the person singing and the person listening, with no awareness of anyone else in the room. He sang to the person in the back row with the same focused intimacy he directed at the person in the front. He made 10,000 people simultaneously feel chosen. The breath control learned from Tommy Dorsey allowed him to phrase lyrics across lengths that other singers had to break with breaths, creating a continuous emotional current that carried listeners with it involuntarily. The musicianship absorbed from years of studying records and performing in roadhouses allowed him to find the exact note, the exact dynamic, the exact tempo that served the lyric's emotional truth rather than the arrangement's technical demands. And underneath all of it, the technique, the phrasing, the breath, the musicianship, was the thing that cannot be taught and cannot be manufactured. The absolute sincerity of a man who had grown up wanting to be exactly this and had spent every year of his life becoming exactly this, and who brought to every song the full weight of everything he had wanted and feared and lost and loved. The Hoboken kid who had been set aside on a cold table at birth, the boy whose mother was always busy and whose father was always quiet, the young man who had slept on floors and driven broken-down cars between gigs that paid nothing. The singer who had stood in front of audiences that ignored him and kept going anyway. All of that was in the voice, every single time. By the end of 1942, Frank Sinatra was the most famous entertainer in America, the most successful debut in popular music history. The Columbus Day Riot made the front pages of every major newspaper in the country. Record labels competed for his signature. Hollywood called. The scarred baby from Hoboken had done what everyone told him was impossible. But the real tests had not yet begun, because fame is not the hardest thing a man can face. Fame is easy compared to what was coming. The accusations, the hatred, the woman who would own him completely the year everything was taken at once, and the question of whether a man who had built himself from nothing could build himself a second time from the rubble of everything he had constructed. Next episode, America goes to war. Frank Sinatra cannot go with them, and the country that had screamed his name turns on him with a ferocity that makes the Paramount seem like a distant dream. The kid from Hoboken was about to learn what it cost to be Frank Sinatra when America decided it hated you.